Picture this. You are alone in a vast, snowy wilderness. The temperature is dropping rapidly and night is closing in. The wind whips around you, chilling you to the bone. The snow beneath your feet crunches, a stark reminder of the frigid environment you find yourself in. You're in the heart of winter, where the cold is relentless and the silence deafening. This is a world that's indifferent to your survival, but it's also a world that's teeming with the materials and opportunities you need to endure. However, survival isn't given. It's earned through knowledge, preparation, and quick thinking. Imagine the snowflakes swirling around you, each one a tiny icy dagger against your skin. The cold is more than just uncomfortable, it's a deadly adversary that can lead to frostbite and hypothermia, and as the daylight wanes, the temperature will only continue to plummet. But in the face of such adversity, there's a beacon of hope, the ability to create a shelter, a haven amidst the winter wilderness. Think of the winter survival shelter as your fortress against the cold, your refuge in the snow. It's a structure that, when built correctly, can protect you from the harshest elements and provide you with a warm, safe place to rest. But the key phrase here is when built correctly. A poorly constructed shelter can be just as dangerous as no shelter at all, leading to exposure and a whole host of other problems. Therefore, understanding how to build an effective winter survival shelter is of utmost importance. It's not just about piling snow into a mound or finding a hollow in the ground. It's about choosing the right location, gathering the right materials, and using the right techniques to construct a solid, insulated shelter that can keep you warm and safe throughout the night. In such a dire situation, a lifeline lies in the ability to construct a winter survival shelter. It's a skill that can mean the difference between life and death, between enduring the cold and succumbing to it. So, let's delve into this life-saving knowledge, starting with how to choose the perfect location for your winter survival shelter. In the face of daunting cold, the first crucial decision is selecting a strategic location for your shelter. It's not just about finding a spot that looks good, it's about analyzing the environment, assessing the risks, and making a life-saving decision. So, where do you start? Consider the wind direction. You want the entrance of your shelter to face away from the prevailing winds. This way, you can minimize the chilling drafts that could otherwise sweep through your shelter. Therefore, understanding the local weather patterns can be a game changer, but there's more to consider. The stability of the snow is another crucial factor. You don't want to set up camp on a potential avalanche site, right? So look for areas where the snow is compact and stable. Be wary of slopes that are too steep, as they pose an avalanche risk. Now think about proximity to resources. You'll need materials to construct and insulate your shelter, so a location near a forest can be ideal, providing you with branches, leaves, and even some potential food sources. However, remember to keep a safe distance from any dead or dying trees that may fall during a storm. Also, consider the sun's path. A location that receives some sunlight during the day can help to warm your shelter, even if only slightly. Therefore, a south-facing slope can be a good choice in the northern hemisphere, and vice versa for the southern hemisphere. But what about water? You'll need to hydrate, right? Yes, but setting up too close to a water source might mean waking up in a newly formed ice pool. So, while proximity to water is important, always ensure you're on higher ground than the water source. Lastly, avoid exposed hilltops and open fields. These areas are often wind tunnels. And the last thing you need is a gusty wind chilling you to the bone or tearing apart your shelter. Choosing the right location can make a substantial difference to your survival. It's a decision that requires careful thought, consideration of various factors, and a keen understanding of the environment. But with these tips in mind, you're well on your way to making the best choice. Now that you've found the perfect spot, the next step is gathering the materials to build your shelter. This is where the true test of survival begins. The wilderness can be a harsh and unforgiving place, but it also provides us with the resources we need to endure. Let's start with natural materials. The most abundant and versatile is snow. It might seem counterintuitive, but snow can be your best friend in a winter survival situation. It acts as a fantastic insulator and can be shaped into walls or even a whole shelter. Therefore, a good snow shovel is a must-have in your survival kit. Next up are branches and leaves. Look for fallen branches that are strong and dry. These can be used to create the framework of your shelter. Leaves, on the other hand, are excellent for insulation. They create air pockets that trap heat, and they're everywhere in a forest environment. But remember, the key is dry leaves. Wet leaves can lead to moisture seeping into your shelter, which can be a recipe for hypothermia. Now, let's talk about man-made materials. If you're prepared and have a survival kit, you might have a tarp or emergency blanket. These can be invaluable. A tarp can be used as a quick and easy roof for your shelter, while an emergency blanket reflects body heat back towards you, greatly increasing your chances of staying warm. Lastly, don't forget about cordage. Whether it's a paracord or even shoelaces, having something to tie your materials together can make the construction process a whole lot easier. Remember, survival is about adaptability. Look around you. What resources are available? Can you use that bark as insulation? Could those pine needles make a comfortable bed? The wilderness might seem hostile, but with the right perspective, it's full of opportunities. With the right materials, you're one step closer to a warm, safe haven, but gathering materials is just the beginning. Stay tuned for our next segment where we'll dive into the techniques of constructing your shelter. With materials in hand, it's time to start building. Now, constructing a winter shelter isn't like building a sandcastle at the beach. It's a meticulous process that requires careful planning and execution. But don't worry, we've got your back. First off, let's talk about a snow cave. This type of shelter is ideal if you're surrounded by deep snow. Start by piling up the snow into a mound. Let it sit for a while to harden. Then carefully dig out a tunnel and sleeping area. The walls should be at least a foot thick to ensure stability. Remember, the entrance should be smaller than the sleeping area to trap heat inside. Now, if you're in a forest with plenty of branches around, a lean-to could be your best bet. Find 2 trees close together, secure a long branch between them, and lean smaller branches against it. Layer the structure with leaves, moss, or snow for insulation. But what if you have neither deep snow nor trees? Well, you could build an emergency igloo using blocks of packed snow. It's more time-consuming than the other options, but it's extremely effective at retaining heat. Regardless of the type of shelter you choose, stability and insulation are crucial. No one wants their shelter collapsing in the middle of the night or waking up shivering from the cold. Therefore, make sure your structure is secure and well insulated with whatever materials you have on hand. Remember, the goal is not to build a 5-star hotel, but a life-saving structure that can protect you from the harsh winter elements. It's about creating a warm, safe space that can shield you from the freezing cold and biting wind. It's about survival. With your shelter built, you've created a barrier between you and the brutal cold. But building the shelter is only half the battle. Ensuring it's properly insulated for warmth is equally important. So, let's move on to the next crucial step, insulating your shelter. A shelter isn't complete without insulation. And in a winter wilderness, the difference between a well-insulated refuge and an icy cave can be the difference between life and death. So let's talk about how to insulate your shelter effectively using available materials and why proper insulation is so crucial in a winter environment. First, let's understand the basic principle here. Insulation works by trapping tiny pockets of air. These pockets slow the transfer of heat, helping to maintain a warmer environment inside your shelter despite the freezing temperatures outside. In the case of a winter survival shelter, the insulation we're talking about isn't pink fiberglass, but materials you can find in the wild. Snow, for instance, is a fantastic insulator. It might seem counterintuitive, but a layer of compacted snow on the exterior of your shelter can work wonders. It's full of tiny air pockets that can reduce the heat loss from your shelter, but remember, it's all about balance. Too much snow can cause your shelter to collapse, while too little might not provide enough insulation. Foliage, like pine branches and leaves, can also provide excellent insulation. Lining the floor of your shelter with a thick layer of branches not only lifts you off the cold ground, but also creates an insulating layer of air between you and the frosty earth. You can also use foliage to fill gaps in the walls of your shelter, blocking out drafts and further improving insulation. If you happen to have a survival blanket or any other insulating materials on hand, don't hesitate to use them. Every bit of heat you can retain will make your night more bearable. Now, why is proper insulation so crucial? Well, in a winter environment, losing body heat faster than you can produce it can lead to hypothermia, a potentially fatal condition. Therefore, a well-insulated shelter is not just a luxury, it's an essential part of your survival strategy. Proper insulation isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. So, when you're out there, building your shelter, remember these tips. They could mean the difference between a freezing night and a survivable one. Safety is paramount, even in a survival situation. As we've already learned, constructing and insulating a winter shelter is a crucial skill to have, but equally important is ensuring that your shelter is safe. Let's start with ventilation. It's essential to remember that any heat source you use, like a small stove or even a candle, can produce carbon monoxide, a deadly odorless gas. Therefore, proper ventilation is not just a good idea, it's a lifesaver. But how can you achieve this while still retaining heat? The answer lies in the careful placement of small ventilation holes near the top of your shelter. These will allow the harmful gases to escape while keeping the warm air inside. Now onto safety checks. The stability of your shelter is key. Regularly check your structure for signs of wear and tear or potential collapse. Remember, snow can become heavy and a sudden collapse could be disastrous. Therefore, always ensure your shelter is sturdy and well constructed. It's also crucial to keep a keen eye on the weather. A sudden snowstorm could bury your shelter, blocking your exits and ventilation holes. Thus, always be aware of the weather and be ready to adapt and modify your shelter as needed. Another safety precaution to consider is fire safety. If you're using a heat source inside your shelter, be sure to keep it far from any flammable materials. It's also wise to have a plan for extinguishing a fire quickly should one break out. Lastly, always have an emergency plan. Know how to exit your shelter quickly if need be. And remember, your shelter is your last line of defense against the cold. But it's not your only one. Dressing in layers, staying dry, and maintaining a good hydration and nutrition level are all critical to survival in the cold. A safe shelter is a truly life-saving refuge in the bitter cold. It's not just about building a shelter, it's about building a safe, secure, and effective refuge against winter's harsh conditions. The key is always to be aware, be prepared, and be vigilant. Safety, after all, is survival. Building a winter shelter can seem daunting, but with the right knowledge and techniques, it's entirely possible. We've journeyed through the icy wilderness, pinpointed the perfect location, and gathered our essential materials. We've delved into constructing sturdy shelters and insulating them for warmth, and we've navigated the critical aspects of ventilation and safety. It's a lot to take in, but each step is vital in the harsh winter environment. It's important to remember that this isn't just about building a shelter, it's about building a lifeline, a beacon of hope in the unforgiving cold. So get out there, practice these skills in a controlled environment, and become comfortable with them. Because when winter shows its teeth, it's the prepared who will stand strong. Remember, preparation is the first step to survival. Until next time, stay prepared and stay warm.